Okay, all right, we're doing all right. Strong start, strong start. Loads. Thank you, I'm Dean. Really excited to be here in front of everyone. So tonight's topic, we're going to talk about something that should come before you start. That should happen while you build scaling your app, but excited to talk about some projects that you can put towards your next project or build. So we're gonna, I'm blocking the screen. We're gonna talk about product principles and why they're important of the new mobile apps. We'll also leave some time for questions at the end. If you do have any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to jump in. This can be a bit of a conversation. And some of the people in this room, if you haven't met, I'm Nick, lead product manager at Bubble. I've been there for about, yeah, I've had the pleasure of working mobile. So you have no idea what I'm talking about. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, Bubble is, I didn't know a video was going to play. Bubble development platform that allows, oh, is this? Thank you. Yeah, so Bubble is a full stack, no-code app building platform. It's really a visual programming language that allows you to build complex web applications, kind of like Scribecast that Alexis just talked about. It's a visual canvas where you can design your app, full hosted database, workflows where you can define front-end, back-end logic, and then all hosted on a secure platform. Cool. So who here in this room is familiar with product principles, has heard the name, has used them? Okay, we have a few hands. Nice. So, well, I really hope that what I say is going to match up with how you think about them. Otherwise, that'd be a little awkward. But yeah, product principles. So product principles are the underlying values or standards, that guide the decision-making while you're developing and iterating on your product. Importantly, these are not the company mission or your product strategy. They're not ways of measuring success or goals that you're setting for your business, and they're not ever finished or complete. And this is important because product principles play a few roles in the development of your product. The first is that they're a North Star, right? They're something that you can continually reference as your product evolves to make sure that you stay consistent and focused. They help with decision-making at all phases of building your product. So from setting a long-term roadmap all the way to making small product decisions during the shaping of a particular feature or a new product surface area. They're a really good way to set kind of a base for talking about your product with different stakeholders. If you can agree on your product principles, then you can gain alignment on maybe decisions that happen after that. And lastly, they're a really good way to help advance the company mission or the product strategy because they're very tightly related to each other. So a little bit on the anatomy of product principles. One, they need to be simple, right? These are things that we want to use every day. So you got to be able to remember them, and you got to be able to say them, easily, not some super long statement. They need to be actionable, right? So this is something that you can reference and you can put into action. They are ideally rooted in some sort of. They're rooted in a deep understanding of your user. Right, so it's not random. It's specific to your user, specific to the problems that you're looking to solve. They should ideally get people excited. You can tell me if our product principles are exciting after this, but they should be motivational, right? They should be aspirational, something that you want to drive towards. And lastly, they should be timeless. Again, this is that North Star that you can reference for a long period of time. So how are product principles developed? It's a bit of a process. It is not a linear process by any means. It's something that you're going to sit down with your team and brainstorm and iterate over time. So a few ways to do that. One, starting with your company mission. So thinking about your company mission, what you're really trying to accomplish in the long term. This is something that should definitely be a part of how you're developing these principles. Your product strategy, right? How are you going to win? What's going to differentiate your product from someone else? Ideally, your product principles should be looped in and are helping echo that strategy. User research, again, I mentioned this is something that's deeply rooted in understanding your customer. And so by doing user research and really understand what your users need, what your users want, you'll have an easier time developing something that is relevant. And lastly, that's all kind of more forward thinking. You can also look back at difficult decisions you've had to make in the past or any kind of core values that your company has to understand where you filled in gaps in the past, what's been a helpful way to make decisions, and kind of use that to drive what you might develop. And again, as I mentioned, this is a very iterative process. So, a lot of writing stuff down, editing, cutting stuff, trying stuff out until you get to a point where you have 3 to 5 statements that right that are actionable, that are clear, that your team can really use to help make decisions. And it's very possible that you start and one of them really isn't providing much value. That's fine, kill it, right? Or maybe you need to evolve on these. So while they're timeless, they can also be flexible and really work for your team. So spoke a lot. I think an example of product principles is a really good way to actually get into it a little bit more. And so I want to share a real example of how we used our product principles behind the new native mobile apps editor to make a very specific decision on the product. So 4 kind of core principles for our native mobile apps editor. I think we started with like 8 and cut out a bunch that didn't matter. So I think arguably the most important, make it easy to build mobile apps that look and feel mobile. And this kind of boils down to our product strategy and how we wanted to approach bringing native mobile apps built on Bubble to the market. Start from first principles. So this is kind of our approach to just building product in general and really relates back to a lot of the core principles, or sorry, the core values that Bubble has. Enabling true cross-platform apps, so users have to only build once. This is something that there's a bit of crossover here, but something that relates deeply to Bubble's core mission, right, which is bringing the power of software creation to anyone regardless of their background. And so having to learn Android, having to learn iOS, having to learn kind of different things, we think runs against that. And lastly, set the user up for successful development lifecycle. And from app creation all the way into getting your app into the App Store. And at the end of the day, right, if your app is not in the App Store, does it even matter? Probably not. So with those in mind, this was a situation we found ourselves in not that long ago. So we had, it was April, we had just started testing internally with some employees at Bubble, and so folks were already starting to build, and a few developers were like, hey, we can't get any further because you didn't add a drop-down element. We were slowly converting kind of elements one by one, and we hadn't converted the drop-down element yet. And so we had a decision to make. How do we proceed in terms of users? So the first thing we did was start from first principles. All right, we asked ourselves, how are drop-downs used in mobile development, right? What do other people do? And so when we researched a bunch of different apps, both iOS apps, Android apps, apps that we know are built on React Native, we found that they're not. People just don't use drop-down elements in mobile development, at least in native mobile development. Instead, they're building these select or multi-select flows in a bunch of different ways. So for example, this is LinkedIn, probably the most traditional looking drop-down input you'll see, but it's pulling up a full screen modal and having you select from a list of different things. Make it easy to build an app that looks and feels mobile. So, all right, we've established downs don't look or feel mobile. So how do we provide users with the building blocks so that they can actually do that? And that's where we found that the makeup was really just checkboxes, radio buttons, switches, bottom sheets, and menus. So pretty simple. This is an example of the Uber app where they're using, again, for a toggle, they're using a radio button rather than any other type of element. And then lastly, enabling true cross-platform apps. And so this can mean a few different things. That can mean a user building an app once and making sure it looks really good on both iOS and Android. So this is for us sometimes making decisions about when something is platform specific or when it's actually cross-platform, it looks exactly the same on both apps. And so that was another decision that we had to make. And apps, we found that this is Airbnb example. If you look at their web, their iOS and their Android app, it's all pretty much completely the same. And they're using a mixture of switches, checkboxes, tappable groups up ahead. So yeah, so it was very much a kind of this like natural, organic exercise of running through our different product principles, applying them to the specific situation. And in the end, I think we came up with a pretty elegant solution of unblocking our users and what they were trying to accomplish. So just to summarize, good product principle, it's clear, it's actionable, it's rooted in here that you learned something new. Would love to open the room to any questions.